Welcome to Ordo Militaris Radio TV. Today's show is on what does Black Lives Matter believe and all the things that go into Black Lives Matter. Today's guest is Brother Alexis Bonello, and welcome again.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be on Ordo Militaris Radio TV. And this is going to be a very interesting topic, so the mainstream media is not going to tell you anything you're going to hear here.
Yeah, in prepping yesterday and today, we're going to have some interesting terms, topics, questions that we need to cover so people aren't confused. And one weird cult out of Nigeria.
So where does Black Lives Matter begin with? Who's one of these founders? Let's start with that.
Yeah. Okay. Patrice Cullors is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. She was born June 20th, 1983. Born and raised in Los Angeles. Grew up in a low-income neighborhood. Became an activist early in life by becoming a member of the Bus Riders Union.
Yes.
What can you cover about the bus riders?
Well, first a little thing on Patrice Cullors. So her family was Jehovah's Witnesses, and she broke with them when she was 16 because she told her parents she's lesbian, and they cut her off from the family. The Jehovah's Witnesses is a cult. It's a religion that practices mind control. It's extremely ideological. It's extremely dishonest. There's all kinds of tricks and manipulations going in it. So a lot of people leave Jehovah's Witnesses in their youth, and since that was their only experience of religion, they turn against religion or they become atheists. And add on top of that her personal story, you have, because women who profess themselves to be lesbians often were abused or extremely neglected by their fathers, so they want nothing to do with men. They're very anti-paternalistic, anti-patriarchal, and they spend their life attacking anything that represents their father. Okay, and this we'll see in her whole political participation. So the Bus Riders Union was an organization in LA to guarantee that there would be low fares for everyone on the bus. And there used to be a low-cost monthly ticket, and they wanted to abolish that, make day tickets. And the Bus Riders Union was organized to get minorities mobilized so that they could get a cheap weekly or monthly ticket. And ostensibly a very good thing, but it was politically motivated to, like most leftist organizations, to throw so much financial burden on the city that the institutions would collapse or they would take on a socialist mode, and to set up a political environment where more socialists could come to power. So a good cause for a bad reason. So that was the Bus Riders Union. It was a local effort. And in many ways it's good because, you know, public transportation is something good and the poor should have equal access to it. I'm of the opinion that public transportation should be free because it's essential to the economy of everyone. But to politicize it, to push leftist goals, obviously is evil, and that's just one of the tricks the left is always doing.
Yeah. Then she goes to UCLA, a very good leftist progressive college. Earns a degree in religion and philosophy. And now she teaches at a private art and design college, Otis College of Art and Design.
Which was founded by a former bigwig in the LA Times, and has a rather national reputation. And she's evidently a person of a lot of artistic creativity, whether that's according to modern standards or not. So, you know, there's nothing objectionable about that in her career. But she's been politically active in the LGBTQ movement, which is a politicization of sexual desires, I suppose, which is one of the most absurd modern inventions, but it fits very much into the matrix of Marxism, because Marxism is a political ideology founded on things that have nothing to do with reality. So it very easily allies with any movement that wants to politicize something that doesn't have to do with reality. Someone's sexual desires have to do with their interior experience. It has nothing to do with objective reality per se, unless when it's oriented toward natural ends, like having a family, generating children. But the LGBT movement wants to claim that that interior experience justifies that everyone obey in the external world, in the real world, the whims and caprices of an extremely small minority whose views of sexuality are aberrant, abhorrent, perverse, grossly immoral, and highly unhealthy and damaging to the bodies of those who practice them. So it's one of the more vicious elements in the Marxist agenda, and it's now being used both in the United States, as we see in the recent Supreme Court ruling, and in nations around the world, to basically outlaw Christianity, because they want you to be required never to say anything against their political agenda. So it's become one of the dogmas of Marxist religion. And it's interesting that she studied religion, even though she seems to reject it.
Yeah. One of the religions she's into is a Nigerian religious tradition called Ifa.
Yeah, so Ifa, or Ifa, I don't know quite how you would pronounce it, is an ancient shamanistic religion of Central Africa, involved in divination and getting in contact with the spirits in order to obtain secret knowledge or knowledge of future things. So it's a tradition in the pagan sense of the term. And she probably got involved in it because she identifies with her genetic ancestry from Africa. And it's something that's not Christian, and so she's against that. And witchcraft, of which this is a kind, is all about control. So it fits very much into the Marxist matrix and the pretensions of some kind of morality other than Christian morality or Western morality.
Yeah. And it is in these satanic practices that she has inserted this Ifa into Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, well, you can see that Black Lives Matter is very into destruction, into an appeal to authority outside of the rational order of things, to complete exaggeration of almost every issue they talk about. All this has to do with superstition. So Black Lives Matter is a political superstition. You could call it an ideology. They are a racist organization. They're anti-paternalistic. They want to destroy any. They're attacking, for example, statues of men, statues of white men, and they call for defunding the police because they view that as she views that, I guess, as her father who controlled her as a girl, and she wants to destroy any symbols of patriarchy. And all that has to do with divination, because nearly all divination in ancient religions is based on forms of society where women rule over men. So that's probably why she's gotten into it. And when women rule over men in ancient societies, it usually means whims rule over everything else. And the whole society breaks down, becomes dysfunctional, because that's not how God ordered the society. God's ordered the society so that men would take the initiative, because men are less vulnerable when they go out. A woman's duty is to care for kids, and her whole body is designed to care for children. And so it's much more vulnerable than a man's body. And so that's why men take the risk and take the leadership positions, because they're free of the duties that women generally, not all of them, but generally subscribe to. And this is not chauvinistic or gender-based view of society. This is biologic-based, okay, biologic reality. But the whole left, and especially the LGBT movement, they want to overturn the natural order of things because they hate God, they hate the natural order of things, and they want to create chaos because they want to justify themselves, who are people who hate law and love chaos, as being your leaders. So they could never justify that unless they first break down your intolerance for chaos and disorder, okay? And that's one of the most fundamental aspects of the disorder they're promoting in cities now. They want you to accept that as normal, as the new normal.
Yeah. We can see on Twitter with all the different news organizations still calling them protesters, but not calling them who they are. And we also see that in the House of Representatives and senators not even saying a word denouncing what is going on. They're too worried about the new military action going on in Syria with Turkey.
Yeah, well, by calling these people protesters, you're just following their own narrative, because these people agenda has nothing to do with blacks in America, okay? Marxism doesn't come from black ghettos in America. Marxism comes from atheistic Jewish people in Europe. It's designed to destroy Western civilization because they see Christian civilization as an enemy of Talmudic Judaism. And they're very adept at getting Christians or ex-Christians or whatever people's ideology are to work as part of their agenda, because Marxists believe that if you just overthrow the current order of things, you'll have a better state. That's what they say to you. But what they really mean by that is if we destroy the current order of power, we can take control and we can rule over you as tyrants. And our ideology is to convince you that slavery to us is liberty. So that's the whole purpose of Marxism. That's the whole purpose of Black Lives Matter. To call these people protesters is a big fat lie. These people are Marxist agitators. They're foreign agents. And that's shown by the fact that George Soros, a Hungarian who collaborated with the Nazis, has backed them. And just read their manifesto and you can see that they're all about destroying American society.
Yeah. When we get to the manifesto, I want to give the people the truth about even more about what is Marxism and who is its founder, Karl Marx, so they understand what is happening.
Okay, so Karl Marx was, his grandfather had been a Jew who converted to the Methodist religion, and I think his father himself gave up the Methodist religion. So at the point when he wrote Das Kapital, his famous work, he was no longer a believer, but he was a political protege of Engels, who was a factory owner in England, and some sources say that Engels himself was Jewish. And the purpose of Marxism was to give an ideology that would be easily accepted by the masses, to instrumentalize them as agents of destruction of the political and economic order, so that a small group of people who led the Marxists could take control. And we see the Marxist experiment come to fruit, first of all, in Russia, where the people being upset with the inadequacies and injustices of the Tsarist regime, which was a Christian monarchy, badly run and very corrupt, and who had set up a republic after overthrowing the Tsar. That revolution was in turn overthrown months later by the Marxists, who, to gain power, eliminated all the opposition so that they would be seen to be the ones who truly opposed the Tsar. But once they got in power, they destroyed the Russian Orthodox Church, they attacked Christians, they exterminated 60 million Russians. They tried to destroy the family completely by just saying everyone should live with everyone, and there was just so many children born out of wedlock, no one knew who was the father of anyone. They destroyed the economic system. They took away private property and private ownership. They put all the money and power in the hands of themselves. So basically, it was an ideologic takeover of Russia. It was designed to destroy the Christian nation of Russia, and it very nearly succeeded. It's only because evil men don't agree with one another, and they end up turning on one another, that the system began to fall apart, and that Russia has some modicum of freedom today. It's no longer a communist state, although there is still a communist party there with lots of influence. For example, Putin is a former communist and secret agent. So Marxism is a very inimical, anti-Christian, foreign concept. It has nothing to do with America. Anyone who claims he's a Marxist, you know immediately he's out to stray, because Marxism is designed to destroy your culture, your people, your nation, your civilization, because it is an ideology for the destruction of nations, and by political trickery, lies, and especially violence. When push comes to shove and they can't get their way, Marxists will always start eliminating and killing 10 to 20% of the population. So when these groups get together and talk about chop zones and have people and cut off the heads of pigs, don't think they're joking. Don't think that is just political theater. That's what they really want to do. And by inciting on the basis of race, they're trying to protect themselves, because they know you can't, if you say anything against a black person, they'll say that you're a racist, but they're using reverse racism. And heavy people, there's members of every culture on earth that think theirs are better, and to such an extent they have the right to kill others. And even in the black community in America, there are racists who want to kill whites because they're white. And 90% of crimes in America are black on white, white on black. So they're trying to exploit that because they view that as the easiest way to create an army to bring down America. And they want blacks to rule over white people, but not Christian blacks. They want Marxist blacks. And the fact that they're black, they don't care whether they're black or not. They care if they're Marxists. So you can see that in the 10 rules to fight for black people's freedom that she wrote. You can see that it doesn't have to do with black people at all. It has to do with Marxism.
Yeah. In the first rule, it says from the actual manifesto, show up in defense of black people. If you're a non-black person of color, it is your responsibility to call out anti-blackness and white supremacy in your community. If you are a white person, read up on what it means to be actively anti-racist.
Yeah, so here, what she basically stated as a principle is racism. Let me read what her statement, and I'll change the words and see what your reaction is. Show up in defense of white people. If you are a non-white person of color, it is your responsibility to call out anti-whiteness and black supremacy in your community. If you are a black person, read up on what it means to be actively anti-white. So that sounds like something written by the KKK. She just changed the word white to black. So it's just another form of bigotry and racism. And anyone who reads that should just see it for what it is. But, you know, I mean, she doesn't even get it right because she put a period at the end of her first sentence in a manifesto as a title.
In the second one, center black voices and demands. The media is grossly misrepresenting the uprisings, and it's critical for us to uplift the demands of black people as they call out the racist institutions that oppress and kill black people. Affirm black life and lift up black futures. Now that one, they themselves have broken. What shops did they destroy?
Exactly, yeah. Well, the Marxists are complete hypocrites. What they say will always be a cover for what they do. But if you compare the two, they don't make sense. So first of all, the problem in America is not racism. I'm an anthropologist, so in my opinion, it's not racism. The problem is cultural misunderstanding and cultural robbery. Okay, so when the Muslims in Africa sold slaves to slavers who brought them to the New World, mostly they were Dutch Protestants who bought the slaves, and many of them were Jewish merchants, and there were even blacks who bought slaves. and brought them here to America. The kind of slavery that was established in many plantations in America was racial slavery, in the sense of, unlike the European tradition, that if you were sold into slavery, you could get your way out and your children wouldn't be slaves. The concept of racial slavery was you were a slave because of your race. And this was a concept that came out of Germany and Kant, that viewed the color of a person as somehow having to do with his essence, which no Christian ever held that idea. As a matter of fact, the first to condemn racial slaveries were the Roman pontiffs, the popes of Rome, and 3 or 4 bulls where they excommunicated anyone involved in it. Okay. And the popes even required those who owned slaves to free the children of the slaves. Was it obeyed in every Catholic country? No, but that was the Christian teaching. So the problem with racial slavery was it taught racism. It was predicated on racism. But the bigger problem is that people were taken from Africa, put on plantations in the United States, and they never became Westerners. They were treated as chattel. The family was broken up. They were dehumanized. Okay, that's without question. Dehumanized more than any other slave in any other society. For example, in Roman slaves were taught Latin, even sometimes Greek. They were not just people who worked in the fields. They were also people who taught children. They became educated. They were not just poor people who were enslaved. They were actually educated people enslaved, and they were taken as prisoners in war, and they could get out of slavery. So actually, in Latin, there's no word for slavery. It's called servitude in Latin. Slavery is a later concept. So you can't even use the same word. It was servitude. But what we had in America was not, in addition to indentured servitude, which whites came over as an indentured servants to work on plantations in Virginia. But the slavery of blacks was a different thing. But what happened was these people were robbed of their culture, their whole traditions, because West Africans, if you go to West Africa today, they have a very strong family life, a very strong identity, strong family values, strong concepts of marriage and community and responsibility based on the tribes that they have in their languages and their beautiful thing, and they are strong for that reason. But the slaves in America, since they were treated like cattle, were deprived of a human culture, of an ability to live like human beings. So President Lincoln, when he freed the slaves, he gave them civil liberty, but no one gave them back their culture. And so blacks in America are in a situation where if they live together in ghettos, they have a certain culture there, but it's not one that's taken return to all the traditions of Africa, nor is it one that has accepted all the traditions of Western society. So they're kind of like, they're in a special kind of cultural environment. They have their own way of acting and reacting, which are different. If you've had any black friends who grew up in a ghetto, you know they talk different. They tend to be moving about. They're excellent dancers, whereas Westerners are very controlled and reserved. They tend to act out, even their churches are dancing and singing all over the place, which is true even in Africa. So when they come in contact with police who are trained in Western systems of law and Western systems of how you react to someone and how you should respect someone, it's just natural there's going to be misunderstandings. And I think almost all these cases where black people are accidentally or unnecessarily suffer violence, even to the point of death, you have a misunderstanding of what the person was expecting the police to do and what the police did. On top of that, there's all the memories of how black people were treated in the South, in the institutions of slavery. And so you get a lot of misunderstanding. So I'm totally in agreement with Trump that certain methods of interaction need to be banned, okay? But the purpose of the police should never use deadly force unless deadly force is being used against them, not just fear of it being used against them. At the same time, the community leaders in the black communities have to tell their people not to act out in the presence of the police. Don't consider them the enemy, okay? They're your friends. And so try to be compliant, okay? So there's two parts of this problem here. It has nothing to do with racism per se. It's because in the United States, you have a special cultural situation where the people in these ghettos don't have the expectation that you or I would have with the police. I mean, I was first time I was ever in Kansas, a policeman saw me hitchhiking, and he asked me for my identification. So I lifted up my habit to get it. He thought I was reaching for a gun, and he slammed me down in the front of his car. I didn't know what was going on, but because I had been raised in Western civilization, I view myself as a white person, though you might say I'm not. I knew that the best thing to do in that moment was be compliant and submissive, because I had confidence that the policeman would not use more violence on me. Once he realized that I wasn't reaching for a gun, I was just reaching for my driver's license. And then he explained to me, well, one of his colleagues was killed just 2 weeks earlier by some strange looking person on that same road who didn't react as I react. And he was so embarrassed for what he did to me that he drove me an extra 20 miles and helped me on my way. But so I can understand that someone who has an expectation of white people coming for you and hanging you at night, because that's what went on in the South during the era of slavery or even post a Civil War period, you might act with violence and attempt to defend yourself. And then misunderstanding arises because the police are trained when force is used, use force against them. So both need education. And this is not a racial thing. This is a cultural thing, okay? Someone who has the same exact expectations of the police with doubt as many Black people in this country do with the police would react the same way regardless of their being Black. So it has nothing to do with being Black. It has to do with an extreme cultural deprivation and robbery of the people who were brought here from Africa as slaves. The United States has to recognize that. And that's why when police interact with people who are descendants of American slaves or who grew up in ghettos, they have to understand there's a different expectation. How do you react? Of when you have the right to defend yourself and when you can move and react, okay? A white person tends to be passive, but Blacks who follow the cultural traditions of Africa tend to act, tend to react. If you grew up in the Congo and you didn't react, some lion or wild animal will kill you. You have to be quick on your feet and react immediately. Whereas in Northern Europe, that wasn't the case. So even the police have to understand that. And we're not talking about racial things. We're talking about cultural traditions. The way people react is not good or evil. It's just a tradition, okay? And you have to know how to talk with people of different cultures and react with people of cultures, you know? I remember a priest told me that he got punched in the nose by a fellow priest once. And I said, how is that Liz? Because, well, this priest is from West Africa. And I wanted to correct certain things he was doing, so I was criticizing him. And the more I criticized him, the more he smiled. So I figured he liked it, so I gave him more and more criticism. But he didn't understand is that in Africa, you don't criticize someone who's older than you. And this priest was older than him, and he didn't know that. And that part of West Africa, you show displeasure by smiling, not by frowning. So he was making this guy more and more mad, and he thought he was making him glad. And so because this misunderstanding got to a point, the Black priest, punched the white priest in the nose. And I explained to him what he did wrong. He just didn't know it. He became terrified because he didn't understand it. This is what you call cultural conflict. In anthropology, we study this all the time. And because each culture has its way of expressing itself, and you have to know how to read the signs of communication the other person's giving. So these things happen. It has to do with culture. A Black raised in England who didn't know how people in Africa reacted would have been punched in the nose just as much, whether it has nothing to do with that of skin color here, it has to do with culture. So what they're pushing here in Black Lives Matter is racism, because they're saying it's not culture, it's race. And that is a lie. It has nothing to do with your skin color. It has to do with there are many Black people in the United States who don't grow up in ghettos or who immigrated from Africa. And they have nothing to do with what's going on in the ghettos in the United States, okay? And you couldn't tell, even from their voice, that what race they were when they talked, because they speak English just like anyone else. And I've lived in Alabama. I remember once going to the supermarket, and the person behind me talked with a kind of ghettoese. And I said to myself, this is before I became an anthropologist, I said to myself, if I had to guess from his voice, I would guess that he's Black, but maybe I'm wrong. So I turned around and no, the guy was white. But because he grew up in a black ghetto, he spoke English with the same accent and the same vocabulary as a black man. And so you can't, it has nothing to do with race, it's culture. And this is something that the American government hasn't yet understand. The American government likes saying what race you are on your identification papers. That should be eliminated. What does it matter what race? Your human race, that is your race. The idea that we categorize people by color is already wrong, okay? Because that sets up the problem. That sets up the white-black problem. But America is a melting pot of many cultures, and the police and the government have to understand that a bona fide, honest American citizen, because of his family lineage and culture and where his people came from, might react differently in front of a police officer than another American, because your culture is part of who you are and your values, and it affects everything, how you move, how you respect other people. So all this thing has to be looked at correctly. Otherwise, it's just used to promote hate, because the Marxists will find anything they can look for to bring down a society. And America has to stand strong against racism and the ideologic exploitation of racism, like what this woman and Black Lives Matter is involved in.
Yeah. So, one of the main things that I see here is about they want to call out the racist institutions that oppress and kill Black people, but you don't see them go to Planned Parenthood.
No, exactly. And Planned Parenthood has killed, I think, last thought, I think they've killed 30 million Black people, okay? Because Planned Parenthood was founded by whites who wanted to kill Blacks, okay? They don't go after Planned Parenthood because the people funding an organization like Black Lives Matter are the same sort of people that fund Planned Parenthood, okay? So for example, in her manifesto, she wrote, learn your country's history and prevent it from repeating herself. And yet her organization wants to tear down statues, okay, of white people and destroy that history. So, you know, it's just be willing to be wrong and learn to grow. Well, her organization is totally on the contrary. They want to teach you to be wrong and teach you not to grow. She wants you to join an organization, but she means by that a Marxist anarchical organization. Know your rights. What she means by that is she wants to act out as an anarchist and claim that is your right. Okay. She wants you to defund the police. Well, how can there be law and order in society if the police were defunded? Okay, the police have a right to a salary, and they have a right to support their family. So to say defund the police is like saying don't pay a person an honest wage. Well, how are they advocating for the common worker if that is the case? No, they want to defund police because they want anarchy so they can take control and kill you, destroy your business, and turn your city into a dictatorship and a hellhole. So learn about the abolition movement and the reparations movement. They're totally two different things. The abolition movement was effective in the United States in bringing about the end of slavery, and that is a great thing. Although some abolitionists were violent and committed crimes, okay? But the reparations movement is completely illogical, because if we start talking about anyone today having the right to receive monetary reparation because of some injustice that his great-great-grandfather suffered, then there'd be chaos in the world, because all of us have great-great-grandparents who suffered from something, okay? It's just like the Jews who claim that Israel belongs to them if they weren't there in 2,000 years. If every people claimed that the land where their nation lived 2,000 years ago belongs to them, there would be wars all over the world, okay? So these are illogical kind of claims, and they have no basis in common sense. If you want peace, you don't fight over the past. You seek to solve the injustices of the present. Why do they want the reparations movement? Because they want to steal money that doesn't belong to them, and they want to use it for themselves. They're not going to give it to poor Blacks. If they ever got reparations, the money would go to the Planned Parenthood and the white people that run these organizations.
Yeah. You're watching Ordo Militaris Radio TV on YouTube. Please subscribe to our channel, like, share, and all of our videos. please go to ordo-militaris.net. Listen to the radio programs. Hopefully soon we will be up and going with live radio broadcasting, and then have a pretty good set of shows coming up on radio. All right.
Okay.
Let's see there. I also heard in the news that this reparations movement, now this is crazy. They want to take the land of the white people in their homes, in their whatever, and give it to the black people. So they want to make all of us homeless. Is that right?
Well, the thing is, see, the Marxists want to take all the property of everyone and give it to themselves in the name of helping the masses. So it's a standard political lie of Marxism, and it never means what they say it means. But in some limited sense, if they're saying that land that was once a slave plantation should be given to blacks, well, a lot of that land today is owned by black people. We're going to take it from blacks and give it to other blacks. And what blacks are we going to give it to? We're going to track down all the descendants of all the slaves who lived in that plantation. You would end up dividing a plantation of like 1,000 acres to like 10,000 people, and no one would have enough land to do squat except maybe grow a few potatoes. So what would the purpose of that be? And then most people don't know how to do farming. So what would they do with that land? So it's just a way of destroying the reparations movement is designed to destroy the countryside in America, which is populated by people who don't vote for the left. So it's just another tactic to attack their political enemies. Why don't we say, why don't we redefine the reparations movement and claim that the party that would back slavery should pay reparations to black people? Now, they won't say that because what is the party that backs slavery? It's the Democrat Party.
Yeah.
Who are the people who were actually slave owners? Obama's family on both sides owned and sold slaves. Hillary Clinton, too, one of her ancestors, made money on slaves. You track all those people in the Democratic Party pretty much, the big wigs. They all go back to the times of slavery. They lived off black people then, and they live off black people today. So a good tactic would be, reparations. Let's say that the Democrats pay the reparations, okay? So if you're still loyal to the party that promoted slavery, then your party should pay for what those people suffered, okay? And the Democratic Party pushed even bigotry against black people just right up into the 60s. It was only in the 60s they flipped and decided to turn 180 degrees, but that was mostly the Democrats from the North, like Kennedy, who decided on the civil rights movement. And Kennedy was a Catholic. He didn't switch it because he was a Democrat. Ever since that, the Democrats pretend they had nothing to do with slavery. They're all about slavery. They're still all about slavery. They just want to use the agenda to further their goals. That's why the Democratic Party never has put forward a real black. Obama was half black. He wasn't a full black. And no one in Obama's family had ever been enslaved in the United States or in Africa. So he was just a fake, okay? So do they really want to help black people? Well, why not they promote a devout Christian minister from Mississippi who's black? They'll never do that because he's not a Marxist, okay? So they are racists. If you really look at it, they're one of the most racist parties that ever existed in America. And like one monument says out west, they have always been traitors to the Union and they always will be.
Yeah. Now, crime is way up in these black neighborhoods, especially in Chicago. Let's see. Let me see here. Here we go. 104 shot, 14 fatally over Father's Day weekend in Chicago.
And they're probably black shooting blacks, taking vendetta on one another. Because like that TV show that was on CBS, the left once is licensed so that you could go out and kill anyone you want, but it's just criminal organization. So is it helping these poor people? Doesn't help them a bit. There's so many black families that are ruined and their children are shot and getting drugs, end up in prison. It's really a terrible situation. But if you look at all these big black neighborhoods around the country, they are ruled by Democrats because the Democrats want to rule over blacks and keep them on what's now a voter's plantation. Any family that has the wits to get out of the ghetto and move to the countryside and find a Christian town where they're welcomed, they get out of that and become great people. And there's a very talented and intelligent people. There's absolutely nothing inferior about black people. But it's this horrible exploitation in our own neighborhoods with guns and drugs and gangs. Gangs are a horrible social vice that give the young people a completely wrong idea about what it means to be a man and how to grow up and be a leading person in your neighborhood. It's just horrible. And the Democrats do nothing about it. They promote these organizations instead because they're ways of dominating blacks. The Democrats have no respect for black people. They treat them as inferior persons, not even human beings. And that's why they don't do anything to really protect them from organizations.
Let's see. There's a conservative. I don't know if he's American or Canadian, but he's black, and Terry Crews,
Mm-hmm.
and you just calling them out for what they are promoting, black supremacy.
Yeah, racism. There's also an excellent sheriff from, I think, Minnesota. Clark, I think is his name. Excellent. They'll never promote people like that to run in the Democratic Party because they're all about selling off false political slogans, which they can use to enslave black people for another generation. And alas, organizations like this, Patrisse Cullors founded Black Lives Matter, is just going to continue the slavery of her own people by presenting a false solution and damaging the reputation of black people throughout America as people who are lawless and violent. And black people are not lawless and violent. Many of them are good Bible believing people, and they need to be supported in those institutions. That's why you see the levels of crime you see in Chicago, Democratic stronghold, or Baltimore, Democratic stronghold, or Boston, certain neighborhoods in Boston, Democratic stronghold. You don't find it all in the towns of Mississippi, which in Mississippi is like 60% or 80% black, the whole state. Why? Because there they have their Christian churches, they have a community life, they have strong family values, strong sense of identity. Even in their poverty, they are very good people. It's just a bad social environment in these ghettos exploited by Democratic politicians who use them only for a vote. That's all they want from them is a vote.
Mm.
It's really sad.
Yes. Wow.
So to sum up, I would say Black Lives Matter is an institution of slavery to make black people today remain in a social condition where they're going to be continuously exploited. Because instead of providing a solution, it wants to politically instrumentalize them and use them for a Marxist revolution that doesn't at all care about black people. It cares about putting a few white people in greater power for themselves. So it's an organization that needs to be condemned by people of every race and every color and every religion. It's completely false. And it should be outlawed. An organization like this should be illegal and its members should be arrested. And if they don't like America, they should be deported to whatever other Marxist country they want to go to, like Cuba or South or North Korea.
Yeah. I was going to share a video to tell people to go watch a video, but YouTube's not allowing it to play any of the clips. G. Edward Griffin explains how the communists use racial division to gain power. So they are censoring that video.
Well, this manifesto we're commenting on is being published by WeTransfer.com, which is a company that offers a way for transferring files around from one computer to another. Why are they pushing Black Lives Matter? They're an organization run by white people out of, I think, San Francisco. So it's all an agenda. It has nothing to do with black people at all. It's unbelievable the way they instrumentalize it. Very devious, and these organizations. And you say that name again, and people remind that maybe they can go to DuckDuckGo or some other search engine and search for that name and find websites where those videos are offered.
Yeah. It is G. Edward Griffin, where he exposes the communist agenda on how to use racial division to gain power.
Okay.
It's about a 6-minute clip, and it's just powerful.
Yeah, and he gave it in like the 50s. So he was way ahead of his time. 70 years ago, he talked about this. So the left has known this about this a long time.
Yeah. So when we are done here, folks, I'll see if I can find it somewhere else and embed it into the show page so you can watch it there. This has been a great topic. Thank you for coming on again, Brother Alexis.
My pleasure.
And please visit ordo-militaris.net. Listen to the radio, support us. Go to our Teespring store, which is up on the top bar, called Ordo Militaris Radio Store. Get some merchandise. Support the order that way. Become a member, investor at ordo-militaris.us and join us.
I'd like to add one thing. Behind me, in these interviews, you see the battle flag of Lepanto. It's a beautiful flag. And I tell AJ, anyone of his listeners who buys one of these flags from ordo-militaris.us, the corporation will invest $75 in Ordo Militaris Radio so he can get some neat equipment and grow the station. So help the station out, get one of these gonfalones, called a Lepanto flag.
Yeah. All right, this is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.